Hey, welcome guys. Today we are going to learn about another major event in the war. We're going to learn about Valley Forge, and we're also going to bring in two famous ladies and their contributions during the time of the Revolution. So we are a little out of order on our timeline with the first lady that we're going to look at, and that is Betsy Ross, because I did the Battle of Saratoga in October, and this actually would have happened in June of that same year. You may want to pause this video with me and watch the video on Betsy Ross before taking the note on her. So you can either go back and watch all the videos, or you can just pause me and go watch the videos that go along. All right, so after watching the video on Betsy Ross, we're going to take a note on her. So this was June of 1777. Betsy Ross. Whoops, sorry, you can't see that. Hello, Mrs. Patterson. There we go. And June of 1777, the Continental Congress passed an act establishing an official flag for the new nation. And Betsy Ross is given credit for its design. We don't have definitive proof. We don't have absolute and total proof that Betsy Ross designed the first flag. However, her family has fought to say these were her original sketches. We do know that she made flags for the Continental Army, so she is given credit for this. And even the first flag is sometimes known as the Betsy Ross flag. And then I am going to do my best to draw that flag. I'm probably gonna mess it up a little bit. So in the square where we now have 50 stars, it only had 13 in a circle. And it's not perfect, but I'm gonna go with it. And it did have the 13 red and white stripes to represent the colonies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And then I'm going to go back and color it in. And just so you can see the official picture of what it looked like, it's, oh, well, that's kind of tiny, but you can still see it there. That's what it would have looked like. Of course, it would not have been faded like that. It would have been crisp and white when it was originally made. So I'm just sketching out the Betsy Ross flag. And then once you get your notes in, you can always go back and color these later. I believe it started with a red stripe on top. And I'm going fast because it doesn't have to be perfect. But this is what our original flag would have looked like. All righty. If you need to pause, do so. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is Valley Forge. So go ahead and watch that video on Valley Forge, and we're going to take some notes on Valley Forge on our next page. All righty. I'm not going to be able to fit it. I need a whole page for Valley Forge. Okay. All righty. So Valley Forge takes place the winter of 1777 to 1778. So we've gone, the flag's been created, the Battle of Saratoga. The next winter is Valley Forge. Valley Forge is not a battle. At Valley Forge, Washington and his troops camped there for the winter. Okay, so General Howe, we talked about him at the Battle of Saratoga. He didn't show up, remember? He wanted to hang out in Philadelphia. Well, he's still there. So here he is enjoying nice houses with chimneys and fires and warm food. So here are British soldiers. So Howe relaxed in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, we have Washington's troops in the wilderness in the cold. So they're in houses. The British troops are warm. They've got food. They're getting their bellies all full. Life is great. Nope. The Continental Army over here camping out. Give me a tree. I've got, this guy's just laying there. He can't go on. He's just laid out. This guy's like, brr, it's so cold. Oh. And this guy's like, oh, so hungry. They are not having a good time. This is not fun camping trip with the family. Alrighty, it is cold, it is winter, they are freezing, they don't have proper tents or housing, they don't have proper clothing, they don't have blankets to keep them warm, they don't have food, they don't have supplies. Valley Forge is horror. Terrible. Okay. So Washington's troops froze. Some of them froze to death. Froze. They're starved. And many of them are dying at Valley Forge. So the soldiers are watching their fellow soldiers die, and they're hungry and they're starving. Some of them took the wood off trees, the bark, and wrapped it around their feet with rags to cover their toes so that they wouldn't have them, you know, freeze off. It was just terrible. It was horrible, horrible. So why do we talk about Valley Forge? Well, it's because of this guy that we talk about Valley Forge. His name is Baron von Steuben. So here they are just wasting away to nothing. Okay, so I'm going to kind of draw like a little sweepy line. Little, this is like the path, my history path here, okay? So I'm gonna put this guy in. Baron von Steuben. We actually don't even know if he was actually a baron. That's just the name that he gave. Washington put him in charge of the guys at Valley Forge because he had soldier background and training, and he whips them into shape. He speaks German, and he goes off on them in German. And most of the soldiers don't understand him. So his interpreter has to tell them what to do. The soldiers are not trained soldiers. They're not trained like the British are. But Baron von Steuben is like, y'all are going to die here. Get up off it. Start building us some cabins that we can put fires in and sleep in and get warm. Line up, clean your weapons, wash your uniforms, wash out your bedding. You're covered in fleas. He just starts giving them the wherefore and the what how. He becomes probably like one of the very first drill sergeants. He cusses them out in German and then tells his interpreter, tell him what I said. He is not fooling. And at first the soldiers are like, yeah, this is terrible. But because he has them working, they get warm, they build shelters, they start taking care of themselves. They start going through drills and learning how to line up, how to clean their weapon, how to fire their weapon, how to do it quicker and better and faster. So this whole winter, when they could have just sat there and starved and died, Baron von Steuben drills them. And so they learn how to fight. They come out of Valley Forge a well-armed fighting machine. It's because of Baron von Steuben that they come out ready. In the spring, man, they tough. They survived the winter under the drilling of Baron von Steuben. Springtime comes, they's ready. They are ready to fight. They are ready to fight the British Army because they come out an actual group of soldiers, not just a bunch of guys wearing uniforms. So there's a Liberties, kids, I hope that you'll be able to view on Valley Forge. So here's Baron von Steuben, okay? Here are the soldiers. We got one over here. He's like, what? There's a line. Because at first the soldiers, they were just, you know, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. There's another one over here. Hey, wait for me. And Baron, get in line. Lazy. Line up. Look sharp. Stand up tall. Hold your weapon correctly. All right. So this guy is Baron von Steuben. He's got kind of a fun name to say. I'm probably not saying it correct. I'm sorry. So this kind of follows a timeline. So meanwhile, they're relaxing in Philadelphia. Things are rough. And then Baron von Steuben shows up and trains them up. And so in the end, by springtime, the army emerged ready to fight. Okay, so I'm gonna have my soldiers, they're all now gonna be lined up nice and neat. They're gonna have their weapons all facing the right direction. And we're tougher now than ever. We survived Valley Forge. We look like an army. We're tougher now than ever. And I'm going to go back and put all of my Continental soldiers in blue. Okay. And if you need to pause there, the next person that we're going to look at is Molly Pitcher. So you may want to pause and watch the video on Molly Pitcher and then come back and take a note with me on her. Okay. All right, flipping the page. And we bring her in here because one of the ladies that's given credit for being Molly Pitcher is Mary Ludwin Hayes, and she was with her husband at Valley Forge. It doesn't mention it a whole lot, but there were women who were at these battles as well. And Molly Pitcher, we don't know if it was actually the name of one woman or several women. That's what they started to call the women that carried the pitchers of water to the soldiers. And what that is, you know, the soldiers that are fighting, they would take them supplies, they would bring them food, they would bring them drink so that they wouldn't have to leave the battlefield, hike all the way back to the encampment and come back. They would also attend to the wounded and the sick. So George Washington, you know, didn't want a lot of women running around the camps, and he said, let's try and keep this at a minimum. But at the same time, he allowed the women to eat and get the army rations, just like they were soldiers. So the women weren't necessarily trained as soldiers, but they did a lot of good, you know, for the army, cooking and taking care of the sick. And Molly Pitcher, one of the stories is that her husband got wounded or fell. We're not really sure what happened, but that she just took it upon herself to start loading the cannon in his place and started fighting alongside the men. That story is Mary Ludwin Hayes. Mary Corbin, they said, actually even dressed like a soldier and fought like a soldier. And there are other examples through the Revolutionary War where the women started to be known as Molly Pitchers that participated in these events. All right, so we're going to do Molly Pitcher. And really the first mention of a woman being called a Molly Pitcher is at Valley Forge. That's why I've included this note here. So Molly Pitcher was a nickname. She was not a single historical figure, meaning she wasn't one person, okay? But it's kind of like a composite, a coming together, you know, of stories passed down. She was what we would call a folk hero. That means that there were a lot of stories floating around and stories that were kind of being embellished, you know? And pitcher, like a pitcher that you would carry Kool-Aid or tea in. They had pitchers of water. Molly pitcher. Molly could be a nickname for Mary. In one case, they say it might be Margaret. I think Margaret Corbin might be one of them. Okay, so they get that story has just kind of gotten bigger and bigger. By the time the Revolutionary War ends, there are lots of different stories about women who did heroic things on the battlefield, and they're all given the name Molly Pitcher. So I'm gonna draw a little stick figure, and I'm gonna draw a picture. A little pitcher of water. Give her a little longer here. And then I'm also going to draw another lady, and I'm going to have her loading a cannon. All right, guys, today you should have learned about Betsy Ross and our first flag, Valley Forge, and how after Valley Forge we came out a much stronger fighting team, and Molly Pitcher, which is a name for a lot of famous women that helped during the Revolutionary War. All right, guys, see you later.